One of the things that I started doing is instead of me going into a meeting or talking to someone and say, okay, how can I explain this in a way that will like help you, or just assuming that like I knew what was best for their life, I took a step back and would say, how can I help you? How can I best serve you? And so I just started changing the way that I thought. And instead of saying, I want to say the right thing and convince you and sell you on an idea, I wanted to take a step back and say, how can I serve you, help you get what you want, and help you with that transformation? This is BetterWealth with Caleb Williams. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the BetterWealth podcast. In today's episode, we're going to talk about transaction versus transformational. And this one's really important to me because so often we get focused on like what transactions, like we're day in and day out. We're very much tactic driven. And this is inspired by a couple people. Number one, shout out to Kelly Bonhoff. She's been a client of ours for over 3 years, and she was the one that put this on my radar. She said, Caleb, when we first came to BetterWealth, it was very, very evident that you were focused on transformation. You were focused on this idea of like how we could change the way that we viewed our money and how that could show up powerfully in the world versus a transaction that is very just like cut and dry and just very, I'm trying to find the word that's best describes transaction. Transactions are not bad, but when it comes to something like your money, it's more than just a transaction. It's more than just buying a product. It's like a way of life. It's a way of thinking. So in this short episode, I want to talk and challenge you on just something in my head. So a book that I read a while back, it was a book called Give and Take by Adam Grant. Highly recommend that book. And it essentially talks about the importance of being a giver, the importance of serving. One of the things that I started doing is instead of me going into a meeting or talking to someone and say, okay, how can I explain this in a way that will like help you, or just assuming that like I knew what was best for their life, I took a step back and would say, how can I help you? How can I best serve you? Adam Grant talks about a 5-minute, favor where 5 minutes you'll be able to help someone and just really, really help them in a powerful way. And so I just started changing the way that I thought. And instead of saying, I want to say the right thing and convince you and sell you on an idea, I wanted to take a step back and say, how can I serve you, help you get what you want, and help you with that transformation? And if it includes some of the things that I'm biased about, awesome. The other thing is I just want to be very clear with this is why I'm biased. I think a lot of times we have certain, licenses and we say, well, we're not biased at all. Everyone's biased. Every single person's biased. If you think transactions are wrong, transactions are just a part of life. If they stop at the transaction, that's where you'll get yourself in trouble. We need to be thinking about transformation in everything that we do. So if you have a spouse, if you're married, if you have kids, if you run a business, if you interact with people, if you're involved in a church, just think about certain things in our life that are transactional, and think about how we can add on top of that a more transformation experience. So I'll take our business, and especially when we first started, we primarily did overfund whole life insurance. That's still something that we do a lot of. We obviously have more that we can do, but when we first started serving, that was like the main purpose that was the reason why people came to us. This is where we specialized in, and that's very much of a transaction. You're buying a product that does certain things, and it's very transactional. But what made us special, and this was before we had the community, this was before I did a lot of talking, this was before I had the podcast, this was before I had the book. What made us special is every person that would come in, I would take time to listen. They were real human beings. Even though I didn't articulate ROR, being return on result at the time, I was very, very clear with getting like what is their why? What would a win look like for them? And only would I share what we did is if I could show them how they could live their reality in a more efficient way and in a better way. And I share this because this is so lacking so much, and there's a lot of people in the financial service business that are listening to this right now, and I want to encourage you, when you're serving people, they're human beings, talk about the transformation, be with them, have the mindset of being alongside them every step of the way, and showing them how certain transactions throughout their life, because our life is going to be filled with just transactions, but how that can be more transformational instead of transaction. And so that is something that we're continuing to grow in, and hopefully you can see that in how we're putting out content, in how we're hosting events, in how we're having conversations, how our coaches are showing up, how our team is set up. We've designed BetterWealth from day one to say, how can we be more transformational in the way that we are viewing people and we're viewing our lives. And so just something to reflect on. How in your life can you take this to heart? And then as you're working with someone as it relates with your money or anything in life, make sure that there's more than just the transaction. Thank you so much for listening to the BetterWealth podcast. It would mean the world to me if you could hit subscribe, leave a review, and share this with the people that you know and love.